Welcome to the Rainbow Speakers panel presented by the Rainbow Optimist Club of Southwestern Ontario. Today's speakers panel is in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day in Canada, and we have a really great panel. We want to start by acknowledging the lands that I'm coming to you from are from the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and Lenni Lenape people. And on behalf of everyone at the Rainbow Optimist Club, we want to say a big thank you, Chi-miigwech, to all of our Indigenous communities that have stewarded this land and continue to steward this land. And on a bit of a somber note, you know, this is a really important day for our Indigenous communities, but with the recent discoveries in Kamloops, it's definitely a somber day. So our hearts and thoughts are with all of our Indigenous communities. And I encourage you not to just show orange in your profile pictures, but to do something, write to your MPs. And those numbers are still climbing, and we need to make sure that there's justice for those people. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panel, our illustrious panel for today's event. We have Riley, Sal, and Devon. Hello, everybody. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
I'm good.
Well, thank you for joining us for National Indigenous Peoples Day. I didn't mention off the top, but I did a little research. I know that after years of calling for a day to honor our Indigenous communities, in 1996, there finally was. It was originally called Aboriginal Peoples Day, later renamed to be more inclusive and use the word Indigenous Peoples Day. And this year celebrates 25 years of honoring June 1st as that day and honoring the amazing accomplishments of our First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So with that, happy National Indigenous Peoples Day. I want to start with Sal. Sal, what does a day like this mean to you, for you and for your community?
Well, it's usually a really big time of celebration. I come from the United Reserve, and usually before there was the the virus, there would be a whole we would do a whole kind of celebration at our the ballpark at the res, where there would be fireworks. And so but also it just means a lot to just be celebrating how proud I feel to be Indigenous and born into such a beautiful and diverse culture.
And that's what it's really all about. And I think that's what's really cool about this day. And for someone that's non-Indigenous like myself, it gives me an opportunity to learn more about the Indigenous people in our country from coast to coast. Some of the most creative, smart, wonderful people I have met are from the Indigenous communities around here and even in BC. So Riley, I have had a pleasure of chatting with you, and I know this is something you're passionate about. I love your shirt, Every Child Matters. What does a day like this mean to you?
It's a day to celebrate the diversity and the achievements of Indigenous peoples across Canada. You know, it's really important to recognize all the achievements that we've had, even in the face of adversity, in the face of colonialism and racism. We have achieved a lot as Indigenous people. And it's really a day for us to come together and celebrate each other and to raise awareness about Indigenous excellence across Canada.
That's amazing. And it's a day we were chatting a little bit beforehand too, to reconnect with a lot. We're finding a lot of Indigenous people are reconnecting with their Indigenous roots, which is amazing. And so Devon, on a day like this for you, what do you think? What does a day like this mean to you? I know that you love your community so much, your friends and family.
Mostly it just means like celebrating, acknowledging, and supporting one another, and just really trying to lift each other up. Really, like it's just about being proud of one another and doing your best to support each other, especially through the time that is now, right? With everything that's going on.
Absolutely. Sal, I want to jump to something, and then we'll come kind of back to a little more. I want to know what makes you so proud of your culture and of your people and communities, because there's so many great things. But Sal, we were chatting a bit. This day falls specifically during Pride Month, International Pride Month. What does that mean for you? Because we definitely know there's a huge Two-Spirit community across Canada and lots of people that fall under that LGBTQ plus spectrum.
So it is really important because it just feels like I get to celebrate two very like amazing things about myself. I am very proud of rediscovering the term Two-Spirit and be connecting with other Two-Spirit folks. One thing that I am really proud about with my culture is, even though we do still have quite a ways to go in terms of awareness about LGBT issues, it is coming a long way, especially with the acceptance of specifically Two-Spirit folk in our community. But what I find most important about the I'm so sorry. I'm having kind of like a what I find most important about the Pride Month and falling also on the Indigenous Peoples Day is I really do get to celebrate what it means to be Two-Spirit, like my connection to both the gay community and also the whole beauty of finding also other Indigenous people within that community.
So finding community, celebrating community, and I agree. You get to celebrate kind of twice in 1 month and celebrate all parts of you, which is really, really cool. Riley, I know you're a real academic, so I don't want to get into the weeds with too many things, because I'm sure you could take us to school. I think you're definitely the smartest person in the room. No offense to Devon or Sal. I guess I'm more just talking about myself. But Riley, what do you think for non-Indigenous people? What can people like myself learn on a day like this? And why is it so important that I'm going to give you a loaded couple questions. Why is it so important that we preserve the incredible language and culture of Indigenous people from coast to coast?
I would say a day like National Indigenous Peoples Day is important for non-Indigenous folk to learn. We spend a lot of time, well, you should be spending time doing a lot of reflection on your privilege, on, the power that you have, as well as empathizing and learning about different cultures, whether it's Indigenous, Black, it's all part of being an ally. And so I think that day like this lets us, allows people to have time to learn the land that they're on. So Indigenous people have taken care of this land. So right now I'm in London, and so like the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee and the Lenape people have taken care of this land long before any settlers came and built their cities. So it's definitely really important to recognize the land that we're on, as well celebrating the diversity of cultures. So the Indigenous cultures are so rich, varies by nation, varies by culture, and even communities sometimes have different cultures and languages, and the way that they just do things are a little bit different. And there's such a rich diversity, and it's so important to learn the language and the culture and preserve the language and culture, because there's so much wisdom and so much knowledge within these cultures. There's wisdom far beyond what Western science currently knows. When we think about the natural sciences, we usually think that it's a very Western concept, very empirical in the way that we do things through statistics. But there's also a lot of room for wisdom that doesn't have to come through those statistics. There's stories, and there's oral histories that come from the Indigenous people across Canada and across the world about what we see in the world around us. And it's just that richness that we're missing out if we just pay attention to European, white, and colonial ways of thinking and learning.
So well said, Riley. You're so eloquent, and thank you. I know I threw a lot at you there. I think one thing that really I find a bit that people don't always understand, and something that I really love learning about, is that there's lots of Indigenous people in our communities that have different, like there's First Nations, there's Métis, there's Inuit, and there's different language that are spoken from coast to coast. And that's really the diversity that's there is amazing. And I know that a lot of young Indigenous people aren't getting to learn the language. Is there anybody on this panel that does speak any of Indigenous language that you grew up with? Are you bringing any of that back?
Yeah, I know a little bit. I think I can read and speak up to what would be like a grade like 6 or like 8 level of my language. I'm not completely fluent though. My grandfather was fortunately grew up fluent in the United language though.
Wow.
Like
and Ryan,
he would talk to me in the language, but he would never say what he was talking about. It was always really funny though, apparently.
oh, that's awesome. That's so great. And to have those memories too of the language. Riley, are you learning? Are you?
I'm trying to. It's definitely difficult. There's always barriers to learning the language, whether you're too far away from community, but or programs get canceled or whatever else happens. So I've been trying to learn. I sit with my friends who know the language, and we read the Thanksgiving address. And I read, and I can recognize words and I can recognize sounds, but I can't say anything or translate whole sentences. But I'm getting there.
Well, there's still lots of time. You're very young, and honestly, it's relearning this, that so much has gone away, and a lot of the elders have passed away. And so I think that's one thing, is to really reach out to the elders in those communities and collect those stories. Devon, do you speak any Indigenous language? I knew the answer before I asked it.
No, not at all.
No, I did. Okay, that's good. You're reconnecting with your Indigenous roots as well, right?
Right.
And which is amazing. So, is there? I know that we're in a crazy time, and maybe this isn't the normal year to celebrate this day. And so, as you said, Sal, normally in community, you have fireworks and all sorts of things. Is there anything that you're each doing that you did today or tonight to celebrate individually?
I'll be honest, nothing too much this year. I'm mainly just like spreading word about like current like topical issues happening in our community, as well as just feeling especially proud to be Indigenous today.
I love it. And Devon, you hosting a party there for your family? I guess you can, socially distant, but what are you doing today to celebrate?
Honestly, what I've been trying to do is just message my friends and people that I haven't talked to in a while to just tell them that I love them. Just keeping it basic.
No, that's perfect. And honestly, it's been like 15, 16 months and like, that's what we need to do until we can all come together again, right? And celebrate. But Riley, what are you doing? I love your shirt. And I've heard that you took over something today.
Yeah, I took over the CBC social media for today. Well, I helped coordinate some things to really highlight Indigenous youth here in London and around London, to celebrate, our youth, our Indigenous youth, today. And I also took the day off because I just think that I deserve a day off from all my other commitments outside of work. Well, all my work commitments. So that's another thing I got to do.
You are a busy person, so that's good. I'm glad you did get to take the time off. You mentioned Indigenous youth, so let's go there. What about what would you say to Indigenous youth that are maybe reconnecting with their Indigenous roots? What are some of the things that you found? I know it's hard because people may not live in community. There are a lot of people that live in urban communities, Indigenous people in urban communities. Luckily, the internet helps a little bit, but are there a lot of online communities to connect with? Sal, do you want to start that one?
Oh yeah. There are for sure a lot of a lot of my current Two-Spirit friends are actually online. Well, I do have a lot of my friends in my community that I do have in my community are part of the LGBTQ community. They don't necessarily identify as Two-Spirit themselves. So a lot of my connection with other Two-Spirit folk has actually been from on the internet to other cultures around all of North America.
Wow, and that must be incredible because you can share stories and share knowledge, and create. That's so cool because you wouldn't have been able to do that before. I'm not saying the pandemic made that possible, the internet did, but you know what I'm saying. We need to get, though, on that note, more access to the internet to all communities, because that is a big barrier to Indigenous communities, let alone the lack of clean water in some First Nations communities in Canada. But the internet and web access is essential for everything from health and wellness to education supports. And so that's one thing I hope the government puts more effort into. Devon, for Indigenous youth, what would you say? I know that, you say you're reconnecting with your youth. You said you came out gay a long time before you reconnected with your Indigenous roots, but what would you say to somebody a young person that's interested in connecting? Is the internet the place to start? Elders, what's helped you?
I think right in today's day and age, it's a lot of I got introduced to the hip ways of the Instagram. So that's been super beneficial. Right, really.
I think they call it Insta.
I feel so old. I feel so old now because I have not been able to understand how to use Discord, and everybody just makes fun of me, and I'm like, it's like my BlackBerry is showing. That's what I feel like.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
So Instagram, I think that's what it's called, is something new the kids are using. TikTok and all those, the TikToks. I'm basically maxed out on Facebook. That's about where I got to. And then Devon, we definitely both showed our age there,
right?
to these youngins. Riley, you are an amazing speaker, and so if there are some youth watching, in living in community or out of community, living on reserve or in urban centers, what would you say to them about connecting with other people, and what's been the best thing for you? How have you been able to do that?
So for me, I grew up away from my community. I grew up in the Niagara region. There's not really a large Indigenous community. Well, there wasn't in my city, or not that I knew of. So when choosing a university, I chose Western because it was in London. I knew that it was close to Oneida, which is my home community where my dad is from. But I also knew that there was a pretty large urban Indigenous community here in London. So, I started really late in reconnecting to my culture and also the community. but it's never too late to reconnect. I know some people, I go to school with some people who are just now embracing their culture and learning about their culture, which I always think is a very beautiful thing at any age to do. So, it's never too late to learn a language, to learn more about your culture, to sit down with elders, whether you're 3 years old or whether you're 18, whether you're, 50, it's never too late to reconnect. And to Indigenous youth, there are so many people who want you to do well, whether they know you or not. Like, I'll always be rooting for Indigenous youth because we all need like a little team of like cheerleaders, I like to call them, to support us and empower us through our hard times, but also be there to celebrate when we do something amazing.
Oh, I love that messaging. That it's so good, Riley. You nail it every time. I'm rooting for all those Indigenous youth too, and I think there's lots of people that are. And you're just you speak so well about that. You all do. So we talked about how amazing and talented, and from music to dance to food, so many things, and obviously it varies. But what are some of those things that are really incredible and in your community that you're really proud of? And then are there any Indigenous people out there, maybe publicly or maybe in your mind or like in your local community that you really look up to? Like authors, is there anybody that we can share names of people that we can anybody watching might want to learn more about? Sal, you're a pretty big reader, and you know a lot about those things. So why don't you start us off?
Yeah. So some Indigenous creators I would definitely love to celebrate that I really do enjoy. One of my favorite, like if for people who are more into movies, Jeff Barnaby, is a wonderful director and writer. He's made movies such as Blood Quantum, and my personal favorite, Rhymes for Ghouls, which is a like piece about like a residential school in the residential school era in the Mi'kmaq reservation. And he does like have like very have like powerful like made like very like cool like action like nice thriller style stories is what he does. In terms of academic like reading stuff right now, I'll be honest, I love I feel like some of like the Indigenous authors names are escaping me at this moment. I'm sure like maybe someone else could
No, you're going to
out.
share them. Well, you all said you'll share them, right? So on your socials, you can share some of those authors and stories today, because that would be great, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to check out that director. That's really incredible.
I really recommend his movies. They are wonderful.
Wow, that's incredible. Riley, are there any Indigenous people that you look up to? Are there authors? I know you're a reader too, I can tell, because you said you're a full out academic. So who do you draw inspiration from? Who do you follow?
Oh, I follow a lot of people. I always think about the people who inspire me and support me, are those the people that I look up to, because if they've invested so much time and so much energy into me, and that's something that I want to model when I'm older, and that's something I try to even model now around people, so to be able to support them. So some of my people, a lot of the Western communities. So Chantel Richmond, Diana Lewis are two of the names. They're both professors at Western, and they've supported me going through school. There's been many times where I'm like, do I actually want to be here? Do I belong here? And they've assured me every time that I do belong there, studying and researching. For authors, I have a whole bookshelf of authors that's now extended into my living room. But there's a bunch of books. A lot of my books are like Indigenous research methods. So Linda Tuluay Smith. Who else do I have? I also have a book. I think it might even be a collection of poems by Billy Ray Belcourt. And then there's just a lot of other books that I have. Margaret Kovac, she's a professor in education. She wrote another Indigenous research methods book. And yeah,
So
those
what
are really what I look up to.
So what you're telling me is there are no shortage of good Indigenous authors. So if you want to educate yourself, there's endless opportunities out there, is what you're really saying.
There is.
There is, yeah, that's good. Devon, are you a reader? Do you read much Indigenous literature?
I'm a nurse during COVID, so I haven't done much.
I know you've been so busy,
right? But like local people, Jenna Rose is amazing. She's done a lot of work, like locally.
yes.
Yeah. But mostly, I listen to music. That's when I have downtime, right? The Snide Nose Res Kids. Snide
Yes.
Nose, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They've been pumping my sound system, my ghetto blaster.
Yeah, Snotty Nose Res Kids, also probably one of the best names. I had the pleasure of meeting Jeremy Dutcher, who won the Polaris Prize, who is an incredible Indigenous artist, and I had the I also met Buffy St. Marie, who is one of the all-time amazing people. Talk about like just inspirational. I cry because I listen to the lyrics, and every lyric means something, right? When you really think about it, that's true music where it really gets to you. So the one thing I did want to mention, Riley, you said something about, making sure we connect with our elders and talk to them and get their stories. That's not a bad idea for anybody. You don't have to be Indigenous to connect with people that are older than you and listen to their stories, right? But there is something really special about elders in the Indigenous community. Can you just explain, maybe for people that aren't Indigenous, why is it that elders are so highly regarded in community?
Sure. So our elders, well, even just Indigenous culture isn't really written down. It's passed down through stories and through just being with people. You really have to learn and be in community to learn about these different things. So sitting with elders, the elders have the stories, but not just the elders, even, people who are younger who have that knowledge are still really good to sit with. There's an Indigenous, a lot of Indigenous cultures. Everybody has a purpose and everybody has responsibilities and has a place in the community. And so everybody is respected in that regard. And elders have the ability to share advice, share those stories, share those teachings that make us live our best lives and the most healthy lives that we can. And also share the stories to pass down to our children.
Absolutely. I think that's wonderful. I want to give you each a chance to say any final thoughts, but I want to thank you so much. National Indigenous Peoples Day, the 25th anniversary. And I know it's a huge celebration for so many Indigenous people, but for non-Indigenous people, take this as a day to learn. Do something, reach out, read a book, read an article, peruse the Instagram. Devon's now on Instagram. So get on Instagram and educate yourself about something too. So any final words, Devon? I'll start with you.
I think just the most important thing is like, don't be afraid to learn new things. Like, don't at all. Like, there's so much out there, and especially in the coming months when we're actually allowed to go out and do things, like, don't be afraid to like look at different dances, like if they're having like a round dance, if something is happening in your community, support it, right? Especially like if you aren't Indigenous, support people that are doing fantastic things.
I love it. Yeah, as soon as we can, get out there and find your community and get out there and embrace people again, right?
Dance.
Yeah, dance. Oh my gosh, I can't wait. Riley, any final thoughts?
I would say to Indigenous youth, especially Two-Spirit and Indigenous LGBTQ plus youth, you know, to always don't be afraid to reach out for help if you need it. You know, and Indigenous ways of thinking and being and doing, you know, reaching out for help can be daunting sometimes to an individual, but sometimes it's just what you need. You know, I've had to reach out for help before, struggling with mental health, making decisions that are really tough to make. But there's always going to be a circle around you to support you. And if not, then you create your own circle of people around you who will support you. And so that's my final thoughts.
Oh, I love it. And if you need someone to start that circle around you, Riley will be there to start it. I guarantee it. I'm sure Sal and Devon will be there too. Sal, any final thoughts?
It's very important for indigenous people, especially youth, to remember that the most important, beautiful thing about being Indigenous is the power of our community and the power, like the such the such radical action it is to just be Indigenous during this day, and to just be proud of that, whether you've been born into it your whole life, have been disconnected and are currently reconnecting. The strongest thing, and most beautiful thing that we have is community. And so it's important to foster communities and start kind of like grassroots Two-Spirit, especially Two-Spirit and LGBT focus community supports, and to connect with each other, and not only your own Indigenous culture, but Indigenous cultures across the globe.
So very well said. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Don't forget to share hashtag NIPD 2021. Share those positive stories. Get it trending across Canada and let people know about all the incredible First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people that you know that are in your lives. And if you don't have an Indigenous person in your life, what are you waiting for? Go out and meet some people. They're incredible people. Thank you so much, Riley, Sal, and Devon, for taking a bit of time. Happy National Indigenous Peoples Day. Have a great night.